Okay, policy experience report. Purpose of this report is to provide feedback on issues or on policies that are within the NRPM, the Number Resource Policy Manual. Policies that might not be working as we expected, or that there's been, things change, so policies don't always stay current and have relevance. That's part of today what I'm going to be covering. A couple of them, they're just not relevant any longer, so we want to point that out to the community and let you do whatever you need to do to fix that. Ultimately, like I said, it's up to the community to decide what we're going to do with them, propose changes, removal, new policies, or actually you can leave it as it is. Okay, so the policies we're going to review today are NRPM 4235, which is the ARIN approval of reassignments and reallocations, 4216, which is immediate need, and 422, initial allocation ISPs, wait list, and 854, initial block transfer. There's kind of a contradiction in those two that we wanted to point out. Okay, so 4235 is the approval of reassignments and reallocations. And right now, currently, all extra large ISPs making reassignments of a /18 or larger to a customer must first have these reassignments reviewed and approved by ARIN, by the Registration Services Department. We feel we do a lot of these. We spend a lot of time because it's in policy, so people are submitting them and asking us to approve them. However, it seems to be a little bit outdated because the ISPs, well, first of all, the sizes have changed, and these sizes are no longer germane to the process. But the other thing is people aren't giving out. Since we're not providing free space anymore, the fact that somebody has to come back into us for approval to give out a whole lot of space doesn't really make a lot of sense, because they're not going to give out a whole lot of space to people that aren't really needing it, was the thought. So we're really, saying whatever you want to do with that, but it seems to be an unneeded process these days, that if an extra large ISP or 3X large or one of those categories is going to give out a /18 to one of their customers, that there really isn't a need for it to be approved by somebody at ARIN. It's just, so with that information, it's up to you guys, the community, to think about that and feel if there's something that you want to do. There is a lot of work associated with it. We get a lot of them. And the small to large ISPs making customer reassignments of a /19 or larger must first seek ARIN approval. And again, it's the fact that those aren't really categories anymore. There's a whole lot of additional categories. So we try to apply the policy in the spirit of the policy as it's written, but it doesn't actually translate to the actual sizes that we have today. So with IPv4 depletion, there's no incentive to give customers more than they need. Not all the current size categories are covered, and there's the ticket workload is, there was over 1,000 of these in 2016, and this was the other thing, approximately 70% of those are self-SWIPs. It's, a big guy taking a block and assigning it to a division within their company somewhere. So for them to have to come to us and open that ticket and go through the whole thing of us reviewing it, asking them questions and approving it, just seems a bit too much. So, questions for the community: is this policy still required? And if so, what changes should be made to them? Go ahead, John. Do you need? Okay. Now, the next policy is 4216, immediate need. That that reads, if an ISP has an immediate need for address space and can provide justification to show that the address space will be utilized within 30 days of the request, ARIN may issue a block of address space not larger than a /16 nor smaller than ARIN's customary minimum allocation to that organization. These cases are exceptional, meaning there's not a whole lot of people that come in for that, even when we had space to give out for immediate need. So you see where I'm going here? Okay. So the items to review is ARIN has no available IPv4 to fill an immediate need request. NRPM 422 and 854 now auto-qualifies requesters for an initial allocation, and the policy now allows organizations to request up to a 24-month supply. So the questions, is this policy still required, and if so, to cover what circumstances? So the gist of the whole thing is if you have an immediate need for IPv4 addresses and you put that request in, we don't have anything to fill an immediate need with. You would have to go onto the waiting list at best, and you'd have to sit there and wait for some time to have it filled. So something to consider and think about. And finally, 422, initial allocations to ISP. This is the one that has a contradiction in it. 422 says all ISP organizations without direct assignments or allocations from ARIN qualify for an initial allocation of up to a /21, subject to ARIN's minimum allocation size. When you go to 854, transfers, it says organizations without direct assignments or allocations from ARIN qualify for a transfer of an initial IPv4 block of ARIN's minimum transfer size, which is a /24. So in one section, it's a /21, and in the other section, it's a /24. What happens is people will come in and to request under Section 4, they'll come in to request IPv4, they'll get approved for a /21. Then if they go to do a transfer to fill that /21, it's not really what they're approved for under the transfer section, because they can only get a minimum transfer size of, they can only get a /24. So there's a contradiction there that, the items to consider is the default via the waiting list and only a 24 via transfer, and that both policies allow the ISPs to request a 24-month supply with justification. Is this a feature or is it a bug? It's up to you guys to decide. Should the 854 default initial allocation size via transfer be a /21 for ISPs? Should the 854 default initial assignment size via transfer remain the minimum transfer size for end users? So those are the few things my department wanted to point out to everyone and ask for your help in providing us some clear, good policy to follow on these three issues. Questions?
Any questions for John?
Hi, good morning. David Huberman, Oracle, ARIN Advisory Council. Let's go back to the first one, please, Mr. Sweeting.
You want this to go back to the slide?
Yeah. So you said two things, and I want to make sure I understand them well, please. You said that you get a lot of requests that you have to review for sub-assignments of /19 and /18. And you said generally organizations don't make these unless the recipient needs them, because of course these are IP addresses worth a lot, that are very scarce and very valuable, and that resonates with me. But you also said there's a lot of these, and you put up a number of about 1,400, and you said if we ignore the 70% that are self-SWIPT, that still leaves about 400 requests in 2016.
Correct.
Where an ISP made a sub-assignment to somebody else that was pretty substantial. Can you, in very general terms, talk about what these are? Are these, you're reviewing them. Are you approving them?
For the most part.
For the most part. And you're approving them after applying a needs test.
Yes.
And there are some you're not approving.
I would imagine there's a few. You know, we try to approve everything our customers want.
Right.
I'm not supposed to say, no.
We need to go pull stats
If
to
it needs,
actually.
we follow the policy. We follow the policy.
We need to
apply
actually
it.
go pull stats if you want to break down.
But the spirit, I guess my question for you, and I'm sorry it took so long to get there. I guess my question for you is, the spirit of this was, hey, if you're making this really large assignment, ARIN probably needs to be taking a look at it to make sure you're meeting the needs-based policy framework we all live under. Do you feel like, and you don't have to answer this right now, but I guess the question is, do you feel like with those 400 that you're reviewing that are not self-SWIPs, are you still following, is the spirit of the policy still germane here?
Yeah, well, but some of this has changed. It's gone from 3 months to 24 months. You know, the whole needs basis has shifted and changed. So, I think the other thing that we were looking at is the fact that with depletion upon us, like, can we not have more trust in our ISPs to be given, to be asserting the needs test themselves?
So then, allow me to put you on the spot real fast, and then I'll sit down.
We're not asking you to do anything. We're
No,
telling
I
you this is
understand.
what's going
We're
on.
just having a conversation.
Yep.
And just to put you on the spot real fast, and I'll sit down, to the best of your knowledge, there's no malfeasance going on here for the most part, right? These are generally legitimate assignments, approved or not approved based on circumstances, but there's no games being played here, right?
Actually, now that I've had a few minutes to think about it, but that was part of the conversation I had with my staff, was that they actually have approved all of them that have come in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. How would this affect the transfers after the, and where I'm going with this is, if you're not doing needs assessment, are you then rubber stamping when somebody says, and they say, I need space for the transfer market, I need to go out and get space, and look, I've used all of these 18s, they've been swept over to my customers, but at this point we're not doing needs assessment on them because you're just, if this policy were to change as an example, does that mean that we're just assuming that that space is approved, has been used, etc.? I know it sounds a little complicated, and I don't know where this comes in, but if you're not checking on that space, maybe they could just do it with all 24s, and then whatever the case may be. What's the purpose of this? That's what I don't understand today.
One thing, remember that one of the things is that the size, the sizes that are in the NERPM aren't. There's no size categories.
No, I understand. What I'm saying is, what is the purpose of this today? I understood it in free pool, but I don't understand what the complexity is post free pool with verifying this. Is that data ever going to be used by ARIN in any other place? When there was a free pool, you wanted to know that the space was being used properly, but post free pool,
I see.
why would you ever need to look at this data?
I'm gonna let John answer
The
that.
question's actually turned around.
Right.
To the community, post-free pool, do you want to have this data and what would you need it for?
That's kind of what we're asking.
We're bringing this to you to say, we're doing this, we presume you've got a reason why we're still doing it.
I understand. What I'm asking, John, is post free pool, is this data used by ARIN in any way other than you collecting it and stamping it, but is it used by ARIN in anything else?
I guess it would be used for approving
Right.
transfers.
If someone were to-
somebody's need
Right, if
recipient.
someone could use this as an example of their utilization. So there are circumstances where it could be used, but it's not inevitably required.
Thank you.
And you're collecting it for everyone.
Thank you.
And with all the other, some of the other conditions that have been relaxed, such as going to the 24-month need and everything, it's not that pertinent any longer.
Far right microphone?
Lee Howard, Retevia. It seems to me that in this case, if I worked for a large ISP, I might, and you mentioned that 70% of these assignments are self-SWIPs. I might be inclined to do large allocations to individual departments that were not necessarily efficient allocations if I were trying to show justification for acquiring more addresses, especially while I thought prices were cheap, if I thought prices were cheap. So I can see a reason why we should still keep doing this.
Yeah, to that, Lee, if it's on the self-SWIPs and you're putting in for a large approval for recipient transfer, we're going to look at everything you have as a company. So even what you have SWIPed yourself, you're going to have to, at that time, show the justification. So that's another reason is on the self-SWIPs, like, should we approve them once, and then we have to go back and ask for all that again?
I see. Because you're going to look at it again. You may use, as you just said, you may
We're
use that
absolutely
information.
going to ask you for everything that's SWIPed to you.
You may use the information from the original approval, but you're going to ask for it again when you approve the transfer request. I can say, okay, thanks.
Center front?
Andrew Dole, CrowdStrike, ARIN AC. So two things here that came out of this in my head. One is it's clear that the AC needs to go and revisit the Section 4 in the post-depletion world and do some cleanup and things like that. And the second point was with regard to your last point about the transfer size being smaller than the initial ISP size. My intent in writing the transfer policy change that we did last year was that if an ISP, a new ISP came in and could qualify for a /21 under Section 4, then they should be permitted to transfer a /21. That was the intent of the policy. If that's not clear, then we can make some clarity, but that's how I intended it to be used.
Okay.
Yeah, and the only well, not the only, but the one problem with that is that we've actually been told transfers have to be, everything for transfers is under Section 8. So we can't go to Section 4 to say, oh, you qualify for a 21 under Section 4, so we can give you a 20, we can approve a 21 under the Section 8 transfer.
So presumably, if an organization could qualify for a 21 under Section 4, then they could use the same justification that they did to also qualify for a /21 under the Section 8 transfer stuff. If the language isn't there to support that, then I guess we need to add some more language.
An ISP automatically qualifies for a 21 under Section 4.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't under Section
They don't automatically qualify for a 21 under Section 4 or Section 8, but they could use their justification to qualify.
Right.
And we actually we're following that. We're saying the intent is that they can do that, but that's not what the policy. We're just
I
pointing out
understand.
that's not what the
There's
policy
some clarity
says.
needed there, and that's okay. We
Okay.
didn't think of everything the first time.
Yep.
Right.
That's
Okay,
what we're
and
here.
final question from the middle mic.
Jason Schiller, Google, ASOAC. In my previous life, I worked for an ISP, and one of the big concerns about 854, no, I'm sorry, not 854, 4216, no, that's immediate need, 4235. The reason why ISPs were seeking approval from ARIN was because an ISP, when they give the space to their customer, from the ISP's perspective, it's considered fully utilized. They can't give a piece of that space to another customer. And then when they've run out of blocks to give other future customers, they want to be able to go back and get more. And they didn't want to be in a situation where ARIN would come back and say, hey, you gave a huge chunk of your address space to this customer, and it turns out they don't really need it. So you need to go claw that back and get the utilization higher in that block before you can come back and get more space. So this was sort of a safety valve to prevent that scenario from happening. One could argue that maybe it may or may not be relevant to swipping space to yourself. Some may argue that it's relatively easy to renumber if you're holding the address space and you're using it. Some would argue maybe that's not so easy. But certainly it was in the case where the customer is another entity that you don't have control over, where it would be difficult to get that space back in order to bring the utilization up. So, I mean, that's historically why it was there. We're still looking at utilization for transfer approvals. You have to, your total address space has to be 50% utilized or better in order to get a transfer going forward. So I think it's probably still important. The question I have is there a drop-off somewhere in terms of size? If we pushed the boundary up, say, 1 bit or 2 bits, does that change the number of requests drastically? So when you go and pull stats and look at that, the other thing I'd like to see is a breakdown by size, how many of these you process.
You're asking for a histogram of the distribution. Look at, okay.
Yep, thank you.
Acknowledged. Okay, and thank you very much, John. Thank you for giving this view into policy. And we'll now, I think we have the number status report next? Or?
I think so.